He broke me in front of the whole court, and I want to tell it the way it happened to me, not the way it turned out to mean. Because for a long time the only thing I had was the way it happened to me, and a man's entitled to his own version before the truth comes and takes it away. It was the spring audience, the big one, the throne hall packed to the walls with every lord and lady and hanger-on in the kingdom of Vael, the great doors open, the heralds, the whole machine of it. I was captain of the household guard. 22 years I'd given the crown, the last 6 of them standing at the right hand of Prince Castellan himself, the regentaire, the man I'd have died for without thinking about it. The man I'd taught to ride when he was a boy, before any of this, when his father still lived, and I was just a young guard assigned to mind a small prince who liked horses too much and his lessons too little. I'll set down the smell of that hall because the smell is the first thing that comes back. Cold stone under everything always, that mineral cold the great halls never lose, and over it the warm smells of too many people in their finest perfume laid on thick, beeswax from 1,000 candles, the green smell of the cut boughs they dressed the hall with for spring. And under all of it, faint, the smell of my own fierce sweat starting, though I didn't know yet what I was afraid of. The body knows before the man. I've said that before about other days. It was true again that day. My back had gone damp under the armor before my mind had any reason for it. He called me forward, the prince, in front of all of them, and I went the way I'd gone forward to him 10,000 times, expecting, I don't know what I expected, a commendation maybe. There'd been talk of honors that spring. I went forward with my chin up, 22 years up, 6 years at his right hand up, and I knelt the way you kneel, and I waited for whatever he'd called me for. And he destroyed me. I won't be able to give you his exact words. That's strange, isn't it? The most important words ever spoken to me, and I can't give them to you whole. My mind's done to them what Halden Rowe's mind did to his corridor, smoothed and scattered them, because some things hurt too much to keep word for word. But the shape of them I'll carry to my grave. He accused me, in front of the court, of failing in my duty, of a lapse, a security he'd ordered kept that hadn't been kept, a door left where a door should never have been left, and worse than the failure, of lying about it, of covering it, of putting my own standing above the safety of the crown. He said a captain who could not be trusted at a door could not be trusted anywhere. He said it cold. That's the part that went into me like a blade and stayed, the cold of it. I'd known that man since he was a boy who cried when his horse went lame. I'd seen every weather his face could make. I had never once in all those years seen it go cold at me. And it went cold at me in front of the whole court of Vael, and he stripped my rank, there on the spot, had the captain's badge taken off me by a man who wouldn't meet my eyes, and ordered me from the palace, from his service, from the only life I'd had since I was 16 years old. You want to know what the worst part was? It wasn't the rank. I'll tell you what it was, because it's the truest thing in this whole account and everything else turns on it. The worst part was that I believed him. Not the charges. I knew the charges were wrong. I knew what I'd done and not done at that door. I knew I'd not lied. So I don't mean I believed the words. I mean I believed the cold. I believed, kneeling there with my badge coming off my chest and the whole court silent and staring, that the man I'd loved and served and taught to ride had turned on me, decided I was nothing, thrown me away, that all the years had been, to him, a thing he could drop cold in an afternoon to save himself some embarrassment over a door. I believed I'd been a fool to love him. That's the wound. Not the public shame, though the shame was a fire. The wound was the instant betrayal of everything I'd built my life on, the certainty that this man was worth my 22 years, collapsing in the space of a few cold sentences. I knelt there and felt the foundation go, felt the whole structure of my loyalty come down, and that collapse was worse than any blade, because a blade only takes your life, and that took my life's meaning, which a man finds he values more than the life itself when it comes to it. I got up. I remember getting up because my legs didn't want to, and I made them, the old discipline. You don't crumble in the throne hall whatever they do to you. I got up and I turned and I walked the length of that packed silent hall toward the great doors, the longest walk of my life. Every face turned to me. The lords I'd guarded for 2 decades watching the captain of the household guard walk out in disgrace. And not one of them marked this. Not one of them met my eye either. They all looked just past me, the way you look past a dead man, the way you look past a thing that's been decided. I'd been somebody walking into that hall and I was nobody walking out. And the speed of it, the few minutes it took to turn a man from somebody to nobody, that's the thing about power I'd served my whole life and never once felt pointed at me. It's fast. That's the secret of it. It looks slow and grand and ancient, and it can unmake you in the time it takes to cross a room. The smells changed when I went out the doors. That's a small thing, but I keep it. Inside, the perfume and the candles and the spring boughs. Outside, in the great courtyard, the ordinary smells came back: horse, wood smoke, wet stone, the tannery on the wind from the lower town. The smells of the world that doesn't have a court in it. I stood in that courtyard in the spring light, no badge, no rank, no orders for the first time since I was 16, and I didn't know which way to walk. That sounds like nothing. It was the most lost I have ever been. A man builds his whole self around knowing which way to walk to his post, to his duty, to the prince's side, and take that away and you find there's less of a man underneath than you'd thought. I stood there a long time. A groom I'd known for years passed me and didn't speak, hurried past, because the word travels faster than a man can walk, and already I was a thing it was dangerous to be seen knowing. That was how I learned what I was now. By the back of a groom I'd shared ale with, hurrying away. I had a daughter. Have. I'll tell you about her here because she's the reason the betrayal cut where it cut, and because she's in all of this even when she's not on the page. Her name is Liss. Her mother died when she was small, the fever, the same fever that takes so many in this account. I've noticed that the fever is always in these stories. It was always in our lives, and I raised her in the guards' quarters, half the household helping, a child brought up by soldiers, which made her tougher than any lord's daughter and dearer to me than my own breath. The crown's service fed her, clothed her, gave her a place. My rank was her roof. When the prince stripped me in that hall, he didn't only unmake me, he pulled the roof off my girl, and the first clear thought I had in that courtyard, once the lostness cracked enough to let a thought through, was, what do I tell Liss? How does a man go home to his daughter and say the life that held you up is gone? I'm nobody now, I don't know which way we walk. That thought hurt worse than the badge coming off. The badge was my pride. Liss was my heart. He'd cut both in one afternoon, and I hated him for the second one. In a way, I could never have hated him for the first. I went home to her, to the rooms in the lower town we'd kept, small, my own, not the crown's, the one thing that was mine outright, and I told her. And she did the thing that broke me the rest of the way, which was she didn't cry and she didn't rage. She just came and put her arms around me, my tough soldier-raised girl, and held on and said we'd manage, that I was still her father, that a badge was just a badge. She was trying to be my mother's hand on my chest, the weight that pushes the fear down. She was 16 doing for me what I'd done for her whole life. And I let her, and over the top of her head I stared at the wall of our small rooms and I thought one thought, cold as the prince had been cold. I will never serve him again. I will never forgive him. Whatever he was to me is dead. I'd loved him 22 years and it took an afternoon to turn the love to that, to a cold flat. I will never forgive him. And I believed it as completely as I'd ever believed anything. I was wrong, that's the story. But I have to make you feel how completely I believed it, the wrongness, the betrayal, the death of the love, because the truth, when it came, only means anything against the full weight of how betrayed I felt. If I tell you the truth too soon, it's just a clever turn. Told in its place after the weight, it's the thing that put me back together. So sit in the betrayal with me a while. I had to. I said I taught him to ride. I want to dwell there a moment, because you can't feel what his coldness cost me unless you know what warmth there'd been. And there'd been a great deal, more than is proper between a guard and a prince, more than either of us ever said out loud. He was 8 when they gave him to me. Not gave, assigned me to him. a young guard of the household put to minding a small prince during his riding lessons, because the master of horse was old and the boy was wild, and somebody steady was wanted at the rail. His father, the king, was a distant man busy with the kingdom, the way kings are. His mother had died bearing his sister, and so the boy castellan was raised by the apparatus of the palace, by tutors and servants and guards, loved in the abstract by a kingdom and in the particular by almost no one. I didn't set out to be the particular. It happened the way these things happen, at the rail, over months, a steady man and a wild, lonely boy and a string of afternoons with horses. He was frightened of the big horses and pretended not to be. I told you that already. It came out before I meant it to, but it's the truest single thing about him as a boy. Frightened and proud, which is the combination that makes either a coward or a brave man depending on who's standing at the rail when the fear comes. I stood at the rail. When he fell, and he fell often, wild as he was, I didn't run to him the way the nurses would have, didn't make it a thing, didn't teach him that falling was a catastrophe that brought the world running. I'd just look at him and wait and let him decide to get up, and when he got up I'd nod once and we'd go on. That nod. He told me, years later grown, that my nod at the rail was the first time in his life he'd felt that getting up was his own to do, and that someone had seen him do it and counted it. A prince surrounded by people paid to catch him, and the thing he needed was one man who'd let him fall and get up and merely nod. I gave him that without knowing I was giving him anything. I thought I was just minding a boy. So when I tell you he went cold at me in the throne hall, understand that the man going cold was the boy I'd nodded at across 20 years of rails. Understand that the face that wouldn't warm was the face that had learned warmth, partly from me. That's why I believe the betrayal so completely. Not because princes can't be cruel, they can. I'd guarded enough of them to know, but because this one had been my boy, in the only way that word means anything, and I could not conceive that my boy could look at me like that unless something had truly and finally broken between us. I'd have doubted my own name before I'd have doubted that the cold was real. He knew that. That's the terrible heart of the plan. He could only use my certainty of him against me because I was so certain of him. The depth of the bond was the depth of the weapon. He turned the best thing between us into the instrument of my suffering, and he did it because it was the only instrument sharp enough to cut a hole in the world the conspiracy would believe. I should tell you about the door, the actual pretext, because a stage disgrace still needs a real seeming cause, and the cause they chose was clever and cruel in its own small way. There'd been, weeks before the spring audience, a genuine small lapse at a side door of the residence. Not mine, not even truly a lapse. A guard rotated late, a gap of minutes, the kind of nothing that happens in any household and is noted and fixed and forgotten. Castellan took that real nothing and built the public charge on it, because a charge built on a real thing has a taste of truth that a wholly invented one never does. He accused me of the door. And the cruelty of it, the small exquisite cruelty, was that I half doubted myself in the moment, because there had been a door, there had been minutes. And when a man you trust accuses you cold and certain of a thing that has a grain of real in it, you flinch, you wonder, for one sick instant you think, am I the thing he's saying? And that instant of self-doubt, visible on my face to the whole court, sold the disgrace better than any acting could have. He used my own honesty against me. An honest man accused doubts himself for a flicker, and the flicker reads as guilt. He knew I'd flicker. He counted on the flicker. I've thought since that he must have studied me for years without my knowing, to play me that precisely, to know exactly which false charge would make me doubt myself just enough, in just the right way, in front of just those eyes. To be known that well is its own strange intimacy. He knew me well enough to break me convincingly. Almost no one is known that well by anyone. I was by him, and he spent the knowing on a public breaking, and it was a kind of love, that precision, though it didn't feel like love at the time. It felt like a man who'd seen all the way into me using the map to cut. The walk out longer, because it was the longest walk. I gave you the walk out of the throne hall short before. Let me give it to you long, because I lived it long. Every step of it stretched the way time stretches in the worst moments. The hall at Vael is 40 paces from the dais to the great doors. I have walked it 10,000 times fast on duty, never counting. That day I counted 40 paces, and each one its own small age. The faces on either side, I knew most of them. 2 decades of guarding them, their feasts, their intrigues, their drunk nights and their funerals. And every one of them turned away as I passed. That wave of turning away moving down the hall with me like a wake behind a slow ship. The court closing its face against me in real time as I walked. There's a particular sound a crowded silent hall makes, which is almost no sound, just the small shifts of cloth and breath. Hundreds of people being very quiet, and over it my own boots on the stone, too loud, each step announcing the disgraced man's progress toward the door. I kept my back straight. I want that recorded. Whatever else, I gave them a straight back. I'd be damned before I'd give the court the sight of the captain bent. I walked those 40 paces like a man on parade, chin level, eyes forward. And inside I was a building coming down floor by floor, and not one soul in that hall could see the inside, which is the whole discipline of the trade and the whole loneliness of it too, that you're trained to keep the inside invisible exactly at the moments the inside is being destroyed. I taught that discipline to younger guards for years. Keep your face. I'd never once had to use it for this. I used it for this. It held. The back stayed straight to the doors and through them and into the courtyard, and only there, with no eyes on me, did the building finish coming down. The weeks after were the gray time. I won't dwell long because gray times are all alike and you've had your own, the waking each morning into the half-second before you remember, and then the remembering landing on you like a weight set on your chest by someone who means you harm. The not knowing what to do with your hands. A man trained for one thing his whole life, his hands know one set of motions, and take the thing away, and the hands don't know what they're for. I'd reach for a sword that wasn't on my hip. I'd straighten to attention at sounds in the street. The body kept being a guard after the man had been told he wasn't one. It's a cruel lag that. The body's the last to hear the news. I looked for work, of course. A man with a daughter looks for work however broken he is. And here's where I started to notice the first wrong thing, though I didn't understand it as a wrong thing yet. I understood it only as more cruelty. No one would take me. Not the merchant houses who hire guards, not the caravan masters, not even the rough work down at the river docks where they don't ask questions. Everywhere I went, there was a moment I'd give my name, Joran Vael, and there'd be a flicker, a recognition, and then the door would close, politely or not, but close. I thought it was the disgrace. I thought the prince had not only thrown me out but poisoned every well, made sure the captain who'd shamed him would starve, that the cold went that deep. It made me hate him more. A man can lose his rank and live. A man kept from feeding his child by the long reach of a grudge. That's a different order of cruelty, and I laid it at Castellan's feet, and the hate got colder and harder and I fed it. Because hate at least is something to hold when you've nothing else. Hate stands a man up when love's been kicked out from under him. I was wrong about that too, but I'll let it stand here the way it stood in me. I thought he was starving my girl out of spite. I'll come to what it actually was. A man came to our rooms in the lower town. Not a soldier or not dressed as one, though I clocked the way he moved, the way you clock another of your own trade, the balance, the awareness of exits, the hands that knew weapons. Dressed as a merchant's man, a factor, ordinary. He said he represented certain interests who had need of a man with my experience and he chose the word carefully, my grievance. My grievance. He said it like it was a qualification. Like the thing the prince had done to me made me useful to somebody. And he made an offer. I won't give you the whole of it here because the whole of it only makes sense later, but the shape was this. There were people, he said, people of standing, who shared my view of the prince, who thought the regency had gone wrong, that Castellan was not fit, that the kingdom would be better served by. He was vague, deliberately, the way these men are vague, leaving the treason unsaid so you have to say it to yourself. People who would value a man who knew the household guard from the inside. Who knew the doors. who knew the prince's movements, his habits, his weaknesses. A man with a grievance and 22 years of knowing exactly how to get close to Castellan. They would pay. They would more than pay. They would restore me after, when things had changed, to a place far above the one I'd lost. I want to be honest about the moment, because the honesty is the whole of who I am or am not. I did not throw him out. God help me, I did not throw him out at once. I sat there in my small rooms with my disgrace and my hate and my unhireable name and my daughter asleep in the next room with the roof pulled off her future. And a man offered me revenge and restoration in one cup, and I held the cup a moment. I held it. I felt the weight of it in my hand, and I felt how easy it would be to drink, how right it would even feel, how the cold "I will never forgive him" in me reached for it. For the length of a few breaths I was a man deciding whether to betray the prince I'd loved, and the only thing in the scale against it was a love I'd declared dead. That's how close it ran. I want that down. Whatever I turn out to be in this story, you should know I came within a few breaths of being the other thing. What stopped me wasn't loyalty. I'd like to say it would be a prettier story, the faithful captain who couldn't be turned even by a prince's cruelty. That's not what stopped me. What stopped me was Liss, and a particular memory of her that came to me sitting there with the cup in my hand. When she was small, just after her mother died, she'd asked me, the way children ask the unanswerable things straight out, she'd asked me whether her mother had been good. Not whether she'd loved her, not whether she'd been kind. Whether she'd been good. A small girl needing to know that the person she came from was good, because a child works out early that what your people are is what you might be. And I told her, yes, your mother was good, and meant it. And sitting there with the traitor's cup in my hand, I thought, if I drink this, then one day Liss asks whether her father was good, and the answer is no. The answer is your father was a man who, when he was hurt, sold the prince he'd sworn to protect to men in the dark for money and revenge. I could not make that the answer. Not because of loyalty to Castellan, that was dead, I still believed that, but because of what I'd be making true about myself, about the blood my daughter came from. I would not hand her that inheritance. I'd rather starve us both honest than feed us both on that. So I put the cup down. I told the factor no. I told him to leave and not come back. He didn't argue, they never do, the smooth ones. They just nod and note your answer and go. And the going is its own threat, because now they know you know. Now you're a man who's heard the treason and refused it, which is a dangerous man to be on both sides of a thing. He left. And I sat in the dark a long time, having refused both my prince and his enemies, belonging to no one, useful to no one, a man who'd kept his soul and could not eat it. I felt no nobility. I felt like a fool who'd been offered a way out of the pit and turned it down because of a conversation with a 4-year-old a dozen years gone. That's loyalty in the real world. It doesn't feel like the songs. It feels like choosing the harder hunger and not even being sure why. I knew the trade well enough to know what should have come next. A man who's heard a conspiracy name itself and refused it is a loose thread, and conspiracies cut loose threads. I waited for it. I changed my habits, watched my corners, kept Liss close, and made up a reason for it she half believed. I waited for the knife in the dark that should have come for the captain who knew too much. It didn't come. Weeks passed and it didn't come, and that was wrong. That was deeply wrong, because it meant either they were fools, and they hadn't moved like fools, or someone was keeping the knife off me. Someone with reach. Someone watching closely enough to know I'd refused them and to stay the hand that should have answered the refusal. I didn't understand it. I added it to the pile of things I didn't understand. The unhireable name, the factor's interest in my grievance, the offer aimed so precisely at the exact shape of my hurt. And somewhere in there, slowly, against my own hate, a question started to form that I didn't want to ask, because asking it threatened the hate, and the hate was the only thing holding me up. The question was, what if this was arranged, all of it? What if the disgrace, the unhireable name that kept me visibly bitter and available, the factor who came offering exactly the bait a betrayed man would bite, what if it was a shape someone had made on purpose, and I was standing in the middle of it not seeing it because I was too busy hating the man I decided was my enemy. I pushed the question down. I didn't want it. But it had got in, and questions like that once in don't leave. They wait. They wait for the peace that proves them, and the peace was coming. And when it came, it took my hate out from under me all at once and left me standing on nothing, which is where the truth always leaves you, standing on nothing, having to learn to stand a new way. Liss, in the gray time, because she had her own version and it wasn't mine. I've made this a story about my betrayal and my hate and my months of gray, and that's honest, but it leaves out that my daughter lived those same months from the inside of them, watching her father come apart, and she had a courage in it I didn't see clearly until later because I was too far down my own well to look up. She got work. That's the thing I couldn't. The Unhireable name didn't follow her the way it followed me, and a 16-year-old girl raised by soldiers turns out to be worth hiring. She went to a weaver's house in the lower town and worked long days and brought home coin, and never once made me feel the size of what it meant that the daughter was feeding the father now. She did it lightly on purpose, the way you'd handle a wounded animal, no sudden moves, no looking straight at the wound. She'd come home tired and tell me small funny things about the weaver's house, the gossip, the cat that stole the wool, and I understood eventually that she was doing it deliberately, bringing the ordinary world into our gray rooms in small handfuls, because she'd worked out that her broken father needed to be reminded the world still had cats and gossip in it, that life was still being lived somewhere past the edge of his disgrace. She was guarding me. My soldier-raised girl had learned the trade after all, not the sword part, the other part, the real part, the standing between someone you love and the dark, the weight on the chest. She'd learned it from watching me do it for her, and now she did it for me, and I was too deep in my hate to even thank her properly at the time. I've thanked her since. It's never enough. You can't repay the child who guards you back. The debt only runs one way and then surprises you by running the other, and you've no currency ready for it. There was a night deep in the gray when I was at my lowest, the night after the factor came, I think, when I'd refused the cup and felt like a fool for it, belonging to no one, and Liss found me sitting in the dark, not even pretending to sleep, and she didn't ask what was wrong. She just sat down next to me, shoulder to shoulder, and stayed, saying nothing for a long time. And then she said one thing. She said, "I don't care that you're not the captain anymore. I never loved the captain. I loved you." And then she went to bed. And I sat there with that, the simplest thing. I never loved the captain. I loved you. And it was the first crack in my hate, though I didn't know it yet. The first hint that there might be a version of me worth being that wasn't the rank, that the badge coming off hadn't taken the part that mattered, that a man could be stripped of everything the world used to measure him and still be the thing his daughter loved. She gave me that in the dark and went to bed like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was the rail and the nod handed back to me by my own child. "Get up, I see you, it counts." The peace came on a wet night in autumn, by a hand I didn't expect, old Bevan, who'd been the prince's body servant for 30 years. A man so far inside the household he was nearly furniture, the kind of man who hears everything and has never once in 30 years repeated a word of it. He came to my rooms in the lower town hooded against the rain, an old man who had no business being out in it, and he sat by my small fire and steamed and looked at me a long time before he spoke, the way old men do when they've come to say a thing they've argued with themselves about the whole way over. He told me to come to a certain place, 3 nights on, at a certain hour, a hunting lodge half a day from the city, the prince's own, where Castellan went when he wanted to be unwatched. Bevan said the prince would be there. Bevan said, "He wants to see you, and you'll want to have come, and that's all I'm permitted to say, and don't you tell a soul, not even the girl." And then he got up and pulled his wet hood back over his head and went out into the rain, an old man who'd risked a great deal to carry 6 sentences, and left me staring at the fire with my hate suddenly unsteady under me, because the one thing the hate couldn't explain was why. Why would the man who'd thrown me away cold in public want to see me in secret in a lodge in the dark? The hate had no answer for that. Only the question I'd pushed down had an answer for that, and the question was lifting its head. That ride deserves more than the line I gave it, because it was the hinge of my life, and I made the whole of it with a divided heart. And a divided heart on a dark road is a thing worth describing. Half a day's ride alone, the autumn coming down wet through the bare trees, the road empty the way roads are at that hour, and me on a borrowed horse. I'd had to borrow a horse, the disgraced captain who'd once had the run of the royal stables, borrowing a sway-backed thing from a carter in the lower town and not telling him why. Every mile I argued with myself. Half of me said, turn back. This is the knife. The cold prince has decided the loose thread is too loose, and Bevan's your executioner's bell. Ride into that lodge and you'll not ride out. And the other half, the half that had heard the question I'd pushed down and couldn't unhear it, said, go, you have to know, a man can't live with a why this open. And under both halves, quieter, the oldest thing, he was my boy. Whatever he'd done, whatever waited in that lodge, some animal part of me was riding toward the boy at the rail, and would have ridden toward him through worse than rain and doubt, because you don't stop being someone's steady man just because they've gone cold. The steadiness is in you. It's not a thing they can revoke by taking a badge. I stopped once halfway at a stream to water the borrowed horse, and I stood there in the wet with the cold water sound, and I nearly turned back. I want that down. The bravest thing in this whole account isn't the double game or the lodge or any of it. It's that I got back on the horse at that stream when every sensible bone said run, and rode on toward a man I had every reason to believe might kill me, because I needed the truth more than I needed to be safe, and because somewhere under the need for truth was a love I'd declared dead and buried, and that was, it turned out, sitting up in its grave the whole time, waiting for a reason. The stream was where I found out the love wasn't dead. Before the lodge, before the reveal, before any of it was explained, at a cold stream watering a carter's horse, I got back on and rode toward him, and the getting back on was the love answering, before my mind had any permission to feel it. The body knows before the man. It knew at the spring audience that something was wrong. It knew at the stream that I still loved him. It's a better instrument than the mind, the body. It doesn't lie to protect itself. It just knows and acts and leaves the man to catch up. I went. Of course I went. I told Liss a lie about caravan work, and I went, half-armed, watching every shadow on that road, certain even then that it might be the knife after all, the conspiracies or the princes, that I was riding to my own quiet end in a lonely place. I went anyway. I had to know. A man can live unhired and disgraced, but he cannot live with a why that won't close, and the why had been open in me for months, and I'd have ridden into worse than a lodge to shut it. The lodge was small and dark but for one room, and in that room was the prince. Castellan. Alone, no guard, which struck me, the regentaire alone in a lodge with the captain he'd disgraced, a captain he had every reason to think hated him, a captain who might have come to do the thing the factor's men had wanted done. He was alone with me on purpose. I understood that later. It was the first thing he said to me, in a way, that aloneness. It said, I trust you with my life. It said it before his mouth said anything. And my hate cracked at the sight of it, because you cannot hold a cold I will never forgive him against a man who has deliberately put himself unguarded within a sword's reach of you to prove a point your hate can't survive. And then he told me. I'll give it to you the way he gave it to me, as best my smoothed-over mind can, because this is the turn the whole thing rests on. The disgrace was staged, all of it. The throne hall, the cold words, the badge taken off my chest, my long walk out through the silent court, staged, every minute of it planned between him and no one else, not even his counsel, because the counsel was the problem. There was a conspiracy, a real one deep in the court of Vael, deeper than treason usually goes, reaching up into the Regency Council itself. Lords who meant to take the throne off the boy king Castellan was regent for, and Castellan with it, and who had the strength and the secrecy to do it if they weren't found and rooted out. Castellan had known something was moving, but not who, not how high, not the shape of it. And the conspiracy was careful, sealed, impossible to get inside. They trusted no one new. They watched their own. The ordinary methods of finding such a thing all failed, because the ordinary methods all start from inside the loyal household, and the conspiracy could see the loyal household coming. What they could not see coming was a man they believed they had turned, a man with a true and public and bitter grievance against the prince. A disgraced captain, cast out cold in front of the whole court. Unhireable, Castellan had made sure of the unhireable, had quietly closed those doors himself, not to starve me but to keep me visibly, plausibly bitter and available. A baited hook in the shape of exactly the man a conspiracy dreams of recruiting. He had thrown me away in public so completely that the conspiracy would believe the throwing, would believe my hate was real. And it was real. That's the terrible cleverness of it. He needed my hate to be real so it would read as real to men who make their living reading men. So he told me nothing. Let me believe the cold. Let me hate him truly. Because a man acting hatred can be seen through, and a man truly feeling it cannot. He made me a real bitter outcast so that I would be an undetectable hook. And then he waited for the conspiracy to do what he knew they'd do, reach for the bitter captain, and they had the factor, the cup, the offer, and Castellan had been watching, through Bevan and others, to see what I'd do. And here's the part that put me back together and broke me at the same time, both at once, the way the truest things do. He'd staked everything on me refusing them. That was the gamble. The whole plan only worked if I, truly betrayed, truly hating him, truly offered revenge and restoration by his enemies, refused. If I'd taken the cup, I'd have handed the conspiracy the inside of the household, and Castellan would likely have died and the boy king with him. He knew that. He'd built a plan whose hinge was his faith that the man he'd just publicly destroyed would, in the depth of his disgrace, with every reason to turn, choose not to. He told me, and this is the thing I'll keep till I die in place of the cold words I lost. He told me that he'd known he was asking the cruelest thing one man can ask of another, to be hated by the person you've served and loved, to be cast out and starved and tempted, all without being told it was a test, all while believing it was real betrayal, and that he'd done it anyway to me, of all the men he had. Because I was the only one he trusted enough to be certain would pass a test he wasn't allowed to know he was taking. He betrayed me because he trusted me more than anyone alive. The cruelty was the measure of the trust. He could only have done that to a man he was sure of past all doubt. I'd spent months believing his cold proved I was nothing to him. The cold proved the opposite. I was the one man he'd bet the kingdom on. He just had to make me suffer the belief that I was nothing, because my real suffering was the only thing that could fool men who couldn't be fooled any other way. I sat in that lodge and the hate went out of me all at once, like water out of a cracked jug, gone, and under it was the love I'd declared dead, not dead at all, just buried under months of necessary lie, and it came up so hard and so fast it doubled me over. I wept. A grown man, a captain, 22 years, I wept in front of my prince like a child, and he came down off his chair and knelt, a prince knelt, to me, and put his hand on the back of my neck the way you do, the weight of it, my mother's hand, the weight that pushes the fear down, and he said he was sorry, that he'd been sorry every day of it, that he'd watched me walk out of that hall and had to keep his face cold while it tore something in him too. That the hardest part of the whole plan was not the danger, but having to let me hate him, and not being able to tell me it wasn't true. We knelt there on the floor of that lodge, the two of us, and the betrayal that had felt so total dissolved into the thing it had actually always been, which was the deepest trust either of us had ever placed in another living soul, paid for in the only coin that could buy what it bought, my real, suffered, unfeigned pain. The most loyal thing I ever did, I did while believing I'd been betrayed. And the most trusting thing he ever did, he did while letting me believe he'd thrown me away. We'd been most bound to each other in the very season we both thought the bond was broken. That's the truth at the bottom of it. That's what the cold afternoon really was. What followed, the part that shook the palace, if you wanted in those words, came after and came fast. Because now Castellan had what he'd built me to get. The conspiracy had named itself to me. I knew the factor, and the factor was a thread, and a thread pulled carefully leads to the spool. I went back not restored, not yet, that would have warned them. I went back still disgraced, still bitter to all appearances, and I let the factor's men believe I'd reconsidered, that hunger and hate had finally turned me, that I'd take their cup after all. I played the traitor I'd refused to be, played him for real now on purpose, for the prince, which is a strange knot, pretending to betray the man I'd proved I wouldn't betray in his own service. And they opened to me because they'd wanted me all along, and a hook they think they've finally landed is a careless hook. They brought me in. They showed me the shape of it, and the shape reached, as Castellan had feared, up into the Regency Council itself, to names that would indeed shake a palace, men who sat at the prince's own table and meant to put him in the ground. I won't draw out the taking of them. It was done in a night, quietly, all at once, because that's how you take a thing that's threaded into your own council, not with a public trial that lets the threads scatter, but in one sealed motion, every name at once, before any could warn the next. I gave Castellan the names and the night, and he moved. And by the next morning the conspiracy that had meant to topple the crown of Hale was in cells, and the palace woke to find half a dozen of its greatest lords taken in the dark, and no one outside a tiny circle understanding how. And at the center of the how was a disgraced captain everyone had watched walk out of the throne hall in shame half a year before. That's the shock. The man the prince threw away was the man who saved him, and had been all along, and the throwing away was how he did it. The court couldn't make sense of it. Some of them never did. They'd seen the disgrace with their own eyes. They couldn't fit it together with what followed, and Castellan let most of them stay confused, because a prince who reveals exactly how he roots out treason teaches the next traitor how to hide. So the truth stayed small. A few of us hold it. I'm one. Now you are. When I went back to play the traitor for real, for Castellan, after the lodge, I want to set down how dangerous that was, because it gets one line in the shape of the story, and it was months of my life with my throat under a blade the whole time. Playing a double thing is the hardest work there is. Harder than a battle. A battle is over in an afternoon, and you know who's in front of you. This was every day, all day, for weeks, being two men at once and letting neither slip. To the factor and his masters I had to be the turned captain, bitter, greedy, theirs, and they watched. These were not fools. They tested me. They fed me small things to see if the small things reached the prince. They had me prove myself in ways I won't detail, except to say that a man playing a traitor to catch traitors is sometimes asked to do real harm to keep his cover. And I had to weigh each time how much real harm was too much to do in service of preventing the greater, which is a sum with no clean answer. The kind of sum that stained me in ways the clean ending doesn't wash out. I did things in those weeks, small betrayals of small people, to hold my place among the conspirators, that I'm not proud of and won't list, and Castellan knew I'd have to, and we'd agreed I'd have to, and the agreeing doesn't make the doing clean. That's a cost nobody put in the Shock the Palace version. The man who saved the crown had to be, for a season, genuinely a little bit the thing he was pretending to be. Because you can't counterfeit a traitor convincingly without doing some true traitor's work, and the true work leaves a residue that the eventual triumph doesn't dissolve. And the fear. Every day the fear that one of them would see through me, and that the seeing through would come not as an accusation but as a knife in the dark. No warning, that's how they'd have done it, that's how I'd have done it in their place. I slept badly. I kept Liss further from me than I wanted to, because a man among conspirators is a danger to everyone he loves, and the cruelest part of those weeks was having to be cold to my own daughter to keep her clear of the fire I was standing in, a small echo, that of what Castellan had done to me, holding someone at a cold distance for their own protection, and not being able to tell them that's what the cold was. I understood him better in those weeks than I ever had. I was doing to Liss a smaller version of what he'd done to me, and for the same reason, and I finally felt from the inside how it must have cost him to keep his face cold in that throne hall. You don't understand a thing until you're made to do it yourself. The plan that broke me also taught me, by making me repeat it, exactly what it had cost the man who ran it. That's a strange mercy buried in a hard season. I owe Bevan a page, because men like Bevan never get one, and this account is partly a place to give the uncounted their page. 30 years the prince's body servant. A man who dressed Castellan and undressed him, who was in the room for every private hour, who knew the prince in the way only a body servant knows a man, not the public man, the other one, the one who's tired and afraid and human when the doors are shut. Bevan had heard everything in 30 years and repeated none of it, which is its own kind of heroism, the heroism of the sealed mouth, never sung, never even noticed, because its whole excellence is that nothing happens, nothing leaks, the silence holds. A man can give his whole life to a silence, and the reward is that no one ever knows he gave it. That was Bevan. And Bevan was the thread between me and the prince all through my disgrace, the watcher who reported what I did, whether I took the cup, how I bore the gray. Castellan couldn't watch me himself, that would have shown his hand. He watched me through Bevan, an old servant who could come and go in the lower town without anyone marking it, just an old man on errands. So Bevan saw my worst months. He saw me refuse the cup. He carried that back to the prince, that I'd held the traitor's offer and set it down, and I've wondered since what it cost the old man to watch a good captain suffer a disgrace he knew was false and not be permitted to say one word of comfort. To stand in my gray rooms on some errand, seeing me broken, knowing the truth that would have healed me, and keep his sealed mouth sealed because the kingdom needed it. That's a hard silence. Harder than mine in the throne hall, which at least I didn't know the truth to break. Bevan knew and held it, errand after errand, month after month, and only at the end, when the watching was done and the lodge was set, did he come through the rain to carry his 6 sentences and crack the silence open at last. I think he'd wanted to crack it the whole time. I think carrying the truth past a suffering man you can't tell is its own long pain, and Bevan carried it for me without my even knowing he was carrying it. I've thanked him too. Same as Liss, it's never enough. The sealed-mouth men can't even be properly thanked, because thanking them out loud is a kind of breaking of the very silence that's their whole gift. So I thank him quiet. He'd want it quiet. He spent 30 years wanting everything quiet. After the taking of the conspiracy, there was the question of me, and it didn't resolve the way the songs would have it resolve. You'd think the captain is restored, brought back in glory, the truth told, his rank returned, the court that turned its face made to turn it back. That's the clean ending, and it's not what happened, and Castellan and I both knew it couldn't be, and the knowing was its own last hard thing between us. Because the truth couldn't be told. I said this already, but it lands hardest here. To tell the court that the disgrace had been staged, that the cast-out captain had been the prince's secret hook, was to teach every future traitor exactly how Castellan caught this one, to spend the method to buy me back my good name. And a method like that is worth more than one man's good name. It's worth the next conspiracy caught and the one after. Castellan couldn't spend it. He shouldn't have. I'd have told him not to if he'd asked, and he didn't ask because he knew I'd say don't. So the official truth stayed what the court had seen. A captain disgraced for a failure at a door gone. The men of the conspiracy were taken on other pretexts, other threads. A story was told that didn't have me in it. And I stayed, to the eyes of the world, the man who'd been thrown away. Restored quietly, yes, given a place again. A real one in time, but a quiet one, off to the side. Nothing that would make the court ask how the disgraced captain came to be back in favor. I got my life back, but not my name. The court still half remembers me as the captain who failed at a door. I walk past lords who watched me make that 40-pace walk, and they still look a little past me, still carry the old verdict, and I can't correct them ever, and Castellan can't correct them. And so the public version of me is permanently a lie I agreed to wear so that a true thing could keep working. I've made my peace with it mostly. It helps that the people whose opinion I die for know the truth, Castellan, Liss, old Bevan, the small circle. It helps that I know it. But I won't pretend it's nothing to walk through the world wearing a disgrace you earned the opposite of, to be thanked in private by your prince and cut in public by your peers, both for the same act. That's a particular loneliness, and it never fully lifts. The reward for the most loyal thing I ever did is that I must let the world go on believing I did the most disloyal. I chose it. I'd choose it again. It still costs every day in small change, a lord's averted eyes, a door that doesn't fully open. The truth set me right with the people who matter and left me crooked forever with everyone else. That's the real ending, not glory. A private rightness wrapped in a public wrong, carried for good. The night we took them, I was inside, among the conspirators, playing my turned captain part one last time, because they'd called a gathering. Not all of them. The great ones never gather all at once, but enough. The working corps, in a townhouse near the upper market that belonged to a lord whose face I'd guarded at 100 feasts. I sat in that room as one of them, nodding at their treason, and I knew that within hours Castellan's men would come, because I'd sent the word, the place, the hour, the names, out through the channel we'd built, and there was no recalling it now. I sat among men about to be taken, and I was the reason they'd be taken, and not one of them knew it. And I'll tell you, it is a strange, cold thing to sit in a warm room among people who trust you and know that you have already killed the evening, that the door will open soon and end them, and to keep your face, to keep nodding, to be the sealed thing while the clock runs out on the men around you. I'd hated some of them. A few I'd even liked, which was worse. There was a younger one drawn in over his head, more fool than villain, and I sat near him that last hour and could not warn him, could not say, "Run, boy. This is finished," because the whole thing held or fell on my face staying sealed, and so I let him sit there in his doom and made small talk with him about nothing. And when the door came open and the prince's men came through it, I watched that boy's face understand, all at once, that the captain beside him had been the end of him the whole night. He looked at me. The way the court had looked past me, he looked at me, but worse, because he saw me, he saw exactly what I was, the hook, the turned thing that hadn't turned, and in his face was the same betrayal I'd felt in the throne hall, the foundation going, the certainty collapsing. I'd become, for that foolish boy, what Castellan had been for me, the cold face that ends you. I'd come full circle into the very thing that had been done to me, and done it to someone else in service of the same crown, and the symmetry of it has never let me sleep easy. The plan that taught me how betrayal feels also made me, in the end, the betrayer, so that I'd know both ends of the thing, carry both weights. I don't know if Castellan meant that lesson. I don't think even he plans that deep. But it's the lesson the season taught me anyway, that there's no clean side of this work, that the hook and the fish are the same trade, that I am both the man thrown away and the man who throws, and that a kingdom is held up by people willing to be both and sleep badly after. I sleep badly after. I've earned the bad sleep. I'd earn it again. That's the whole of what loyalty costs when you follow it all the way down past the songs. It costs you the comfort of being only the wronged one. You become, too, the one who wrongs. And you do it for a crown, and the crown is real, and the boy's face is also real, and you carry both, because that's the job, and nobody told you at 16 that the job went this deep. Castellan and I are what we are now, which is changed, and I won't pretend it went back to the rail and the nod. Something did break in the throne hall, even though the break was staged. That's the thing I've learned about staged wounds, they bleed real blood. He made me hate him for half a year, truly, and you can't make someone truly hate you and then truly stop and have it be exactly as it was before. The hate is gone. The love came back. But they came back into a man who now knows in his body that this prince will use him, spend him, Break him in public and let him suffer in the dark, if the kingdom needs it, and that knowledge sits in the love now, a hard grain in it, not poisoning it but changing its texture forever. I'd still die for him. I'd just no longer be surprised dying to find he'd arranged it. That's a different quality of loyalty than the one I walked into that throne hall with. The one I walked in with was a boy's love for the boy I'd nodded at. The one I have now is a man's love for a prince he's seen all the way to the bottom of and chosen anyway, knowing the bottom has a coldness in it that can be turned on him. The second love is worth more, I think. It's just heavier. The first was given to someone I half invented. The second is given to who he actually is, which includes the man who can stage your ruin and watch you walk out and keep his face. You can love that man. I do. But you love him with your eyes open now, and open eyes change everything they're open on. He knows it too. We've never said it plainly. We're not men who say things plainly. We're a guard and a prince. We say things in nods and in being in the room. But he knows the rail and nod thing is over, that I'm bound to him now by something colder and stronger than the old warmth, by a trust that's been tested to destruction and held, which is a better trust and a sadder one. Sometimes I catch him looking at me with a thing in his face that I read as wanting the old simple warmth back, and knowing he spent it, knowing he himself burned it to catch the traitors, that the price of saving his crown was the simple version of the one relationship in his life that had ever been simple. He paid that. He doesn't get it back either. We're both poorer in the old easy thing and richer in the hard true thing, and neither of us would undo it, and both of us, I think, miss the rail. You can miss a thing and not undo the trade. That's most of being alive, past a certain age, missing things you wouldn't undo. I'll end with Liss because she's where it ends, where everything I have ends. She knows the truth, all of it, I told her, after, the one person I told the whole of it to outside the prince's circle, because I'd be damned if my own daughter would believe the disgrace, would carry a lie about her father the way the court does. I sat her down and told her everything, the staging, the cup I almost drank and didn't, the lodge, the double game, the cost. When I got to the part about the cup, the part where I held the traitor's offer in my hand for a few breaths and felt how easy it would be, I made myself tell her that too, the not flattering truth, that her father had come within a few breaths of being the other thing. Because the false memory in me wanted to skip it, wanted to tell her I'd refused at once, clean, never tempted, and I'd learned by then to distrust the version of myself that came out too clean. So I told her I was tempted. I told her what stopped me was her, the memory of her asking whether her mother was good, and me unable to make my own answer be no. And she was quiet a while, the way she gets, the soldier's girl quiet, weighing it. And then she said the thing I'll carry past everything else in this account, past the cold words I lost and the lodge and the hand on my neck. She said, so I saved the kingdom. Half a smile in it, taking the weight off the way she does. And I started to say no, the prince, the plan, you don't understand, and then I stopped because she did understand. She understood better than I had. The plan only worked because I refused the cup, and I only refused the cup because of her. So the whole thing, the whole saving of the crown of Vael, ran through a small girl years ago asking her father whether her mother was good, and a father unable to bear handing his daughter a father who wasn't. She saved the kingdom, my Liss, not with a sword. With a question she asked at 4 years old that lived in me long enough to stop my hand on the worst night of my life. I told her yes, you saved the kingdom, and I meant it, and it's true, and it's the only part of this whole story that's pure, with no cold grain in it anywhere, that the thing that held when everything else was staged and doubled and stained was a daughter's love and a father's need to be worth it. That held. That was never a plan. That was just real, all the way down, the one real thing in a season of necessary lies. That's the story of the man the prince threw away. He threw me away to keep me. He broke me in public to trust me in private. And the only reason any of it worked is that, down underneath the captain and the disgrace and the hate and the plan, there was a father who couldn't bear to be less than his daughter believed him to be, Strip everything else away, the rank, the name, the prince, the crown, and that's what saved Hale. Not loyalty to a throne. A man not wanting to be a thing his child would have to be ashamed of. That's smaller than a kingdom, and it held the kingdom up. I've stopped being surprised by that. The small, real things are always the ones holding up the large, staged ones. It's just that you only find it out after they throw you away. Joran Vael, once captain, then nobody, then the prince's hidden hook, now a quiet man off to the side of a court that still thinks it knows what I am. Let it. The ones who matter know, that's enough. It has to be, and it is.